Have you ever wondered what really happens when a leader of a small nation refuses to back down against the world's most powerful forces? Today, we're diving into a real-life, high-stakes standoff that unfolded miles above the Earth without a single shot fired, yet it changed the course of international politics. This is the incredible story of how a peaceful diplomatic flight almost turned into a global incident, and how one leader's unwavering courage became a symbol of defiance. But before we get into this fascinating event, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below, and let me know, what time is it there right now? If you love stories that reveal the untold side of global events, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and join our growing community. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming up next. It was a calm, sunny morning in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. The city was alive with its usual vibrant energy, but inside the presidential palace, a very different kind of preparation was underway. President Ibrahim Traoré sat silently at his desk, eyes scanning over the final details of an upcoming trip that was anything but ordinary. This journey to Moscow wasn't simply a diplomatic visit, it was a bold political statement, a declaration that Burkina Faso would no longer be a silent spectator on the global stage. Since taking office, President Traoré had worked tirelessly to restore his country's sovereignty. Decades of foreign influence had shaped the policies, economies, and even leadership of many African nations. But now, a new wave of leadership was emerging that dared to question the established global order. For President Traoré, this invitation from President Vladimir Putin wasn't just a formality. It was an opportunity to demonstrate that his nation was ready to forge its own independent path, free from the invisible chains of external control. As the preparations continued, intelligence reports quietly circulated through official channels. There were growing concerns that not everyone would welcome this journey. Western powers, especially those with long-standing interests in Africa, viewed Traoré's close relations with Russia as a direct challenge. Behind closed doors, diplomats from the United States and France had already expressed their disapproval. They viewed this new alignment as a potential threat to their influence on the continent, a shift that could inspire other African nations to reconsider their allegiances. Despite these warnings, President Traoré remained resolute. His nation had suffered long enough under the economic and political pressures imposed by foreign interests. He knew the risks of this journey. It wasn't just about crossing borders. It was about crossing a line that few African leaders had dared to approach in modern history. Refusing to be intimidated, he ordered the final preparations for departure. The official government aircraft was inspected with care, its crew briefed on potential threats and diplomatic sensitivities. They understood that this flight was not just a physical journey, it was a powerful symbol of resistance. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the engines of the presidential plane roared to life on the tarmac. President Traoré, wearing a calm but determined expression, boarded the aircraft knowing that what lay ahead could redefine his country's future. The flight path had been carefully planned to avoid unnecessary complications, but everyone on board knew that unexpected challenges could appear at any moment. With every mile the plane traveled, the message was becoming clearer. Burkina Faso would no longer bow to external pressures. High above the African continent, President Traoré gazed out the window, watching the familiar landscapes fade into the horizon. He wasn't just leaving his country for a ceremonial event, he was stepping into history. This was more than a visit. It was a statement that the future of Burkina Faso, and perhaps even of Africa, would be written by the hands of its own people, not dictated by foreign powers. High above the Atlantic Ocean, the hum of the engines provided a calming rhythm as President Traoré's plane sliced through the endless sky. Inside the cabin, conversations were hushed, and every member of the crew remained alert. Although the official flight path was carefully chosen to avoid sensitive airspace, the risks were far from eliminated. Everyone on board knew this wasn't just a diplomatic flight, it was a moving declaration of defiance, and that made it a potential target. Hours passed with no incident until a faint but distinct blip appeared on the radar screen. Two unknown contacts were closing in at high speed. At first, the pilots remained calm, assuming it was routine traffic control. But as the contacts moved closer, their shapes became clear. These were not commercial aircraft. They were fighter jets, and based on their speed and flight patterns, it became evident they were American and French. The radio crackled with a firm, commanding voice. "Unidentified aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. You are ordered to divert your course and prepare for landing immediately." The captain turned toward President Traore, awaiting instructions. Tension filled the cabin. This wasn't just an unexpected encounter. It was a clear show of force, an unmistakable message from powerful nations unhappy with Burkina Faso's newfound independence. President Traore stood up slowly, his expression calm but resolute. "We will not change course," he said firmly. "Continue to Moscow." The captain nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. The American and French jets grew closer, their sleek forms visible through the cabin windows. It was a silent warninga reminder of who controlled the skies. Inside the cockpit, the pilots held their positions. The pressure was intense. A single wrong move could escalate this into an international crisis. Yet, amidst the growing tension, President Traore remained collected. His mind raced through the consequences, but his heart held firm. Backing down now would send the wrong message to his people and to the entire African continent. The standoff continued for what felt like hours. The Western jets maintained their intimidating formation around the plane, forcing its crew to stay constantly on edge. Every minute that passed increased the risk of a dangerous miscalculation. And then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, a new sound echoed through the radio, a calm but powerful voice in Russian. "This is Russian Air Command. We are deploying escort units. Do not interfere with this flight." Suddenly, additional blips appeared on the radar. Russian fighter jets were approaching fast, cutting through the sky with precision. The American and French pilots hesitated. They knew engaging directly would provoke a crisis far larger than this mission intended. High above the ocean, the balance of power was shifting right before their eyes. With the Russian aircraft now providing a protective escort, the American and French forces had a decision to make. Confrontation could lead to disastrous consequences, not just politically, but militarily. After a few tense moments, the Western jets slowly pulled back, their engines roaring as they retreated from the contested airspace. Inside the cabin, a collective breath of relief filled the air. President Traore sat back in his seat, his gaze fixed on the horizon. They were free to continue their journey, but everyone on board understood that this encounter had changed everything. This was no longer a simple diplomatic mission, it had become a defining moment in the struggle for African sovereignty. As the presidential aircraft resumed its steady flight toward Moscow, the mood inside the cabin remained tense, but a quiet sense of triumph began to settle in. Everyone on board understood that what had just unfolded above the Atlantic wasn't just an aerial encounter, was a historic moment. President Traore sat quietly by the window, his eyes reflecting both the weight of responsibility and the pride of defiance. He knew that this flight would be remembered not just by those present, but by history itself. Back on the ground, the news of the tense standoff hadn't yet reached the public, but the implications were already rippling through diplomatic circles. International leaders would soon learn that despite direct intervention attempts, Burkina Faso had stood firm, and more importantly, it had done so with the backing of a major global power. This would mark a turning point not only for Burkina Faso, but for the wider African continent. The symbolic victory extended beyond a simple refusal to land. It demonstrated that the balance of power was shifting. Africa was no longer content to play a passive role in world affairs. Its leaders were beginning to stand tall, willing to make difficult decisions and challenge historical patterns of dominance. President Traore understood the dangers that came with such bold moves. Economic retaliation, political isolation, and media campaigns might soon follow, but none of those threats compared to the value of freedom and true independence. As the plane crossed into European airspace, escorted by Russian fighter jets, the crew began final preparations for the landing. Moscow awaited, and with it, a new chapter in diplomatic relations. President Vladimir Putin was expected to personally greet Traore at the airport, a rare gesture that underlined the importance of their meeting. This was not merely a ceremonial welcome, it was a declaration that Burkina Faso had found a powerful ally willing to stand beside it. Upon landing at Vnukovo International Airport, the scene was nothing short of historic. A grand reception awaited President Traore, complete with military honors and a delegation of Russian officials. President Putin greeted him warmly, their handshake firm and meaningful. In that moment, under the gaze of international media, a new alliance was solidified. Over the next few days, President Traore attended high-level meetings, state dinners, and the grand military parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. The symbolism was powerful. Just as Russia had once stood against imperialism and foreign domination, now Africa, through leaders like Traore, was forging its own path toward freedom. During a private conversation overlooking the Grand Kremlin courtyard, President Putin reportedly told Traore, "The struggle for sovereignty never ends. But those who stand firm will always find allies." Traore understood those words deeply. He wasn't just fighting for Burkina Faso, he was standing for the future of an entire continent. As the celebrations in Moscow came to a close, it was clear that this visit had achieved far more than diplomatic pleasantries. It had sent a clear and powerful message to the world. Africa was rising. And for those willing to defend their sovereignty, a new era of international cooperation was possible, one not dictated by fear, but by mutual respect and shared interests. As the days passed, the world began to process the significance of what had transpired during President Traore's journey. Though official channels remained silent about the aerial confrontation, the diplomatic world was buzzing. Behind closed doors, foreign policy experts analyzed every detail. How had a small nation like Burkina Faso defied two of the most powerful military forces on the planet? And more importantly, what did this mean for the future of Africa's geopolitical landscape? International media subtly picked up on the change. While no official reports confirmed the standoff, sharp observers noted the unusually warm reception between Russia and Burkina Faso. Commentators began to speculate whether this marked the beginning of a new alliance zone that could reshape Africa's place in global politics. In Africa, the response was immediate and electric. News spread quickly among neighboring countries. For many African citizens and leaders, this event wasn't just a diplomatic maneuver. It was a long overdue symbol of defiance against centuries of foreign dominance. Young Africans took to social media, praising Traore's courage and calling for their own leaders to adopt a similar stance. Hashtags promoting sovereignty and African unity trended across digital platforms, and public debates on the continent's future reached new levels of urgency. In capitals across Africa, political discussions shifted. Leaders who had long balanced carefully between Western influence and local governance now saw a path to greater independence. Economic advisors began exploring new partnerships beyond the traditional Western sphere. Moscow, Beijing, and even New Delhi became attractive destinations for strategic alliances, offering economic support without the historical baggage of colonialism. President Traore, now back in Burkina Faso, found his return met with overwhelming public support. Crowds gathered at the airport, chanting his name and waving flags. He stood before his people and spoke words that would echo throughout the continent. "We have proven that no matter how small our nation, our spirit is unbreakable. The time has come for Africa to write its own story." His message was clear. The struggle for true sovereignty was far from over, but the fear that had once held African nations back was fading. The confrontation over the Atlantic was no longer just a standoff between planes. It had become a symbol of what was possible when courage overcame fear. In the following months, Burkina Faso began to strengthen its economic and military ties with Russia and other non-Western powers. Infrastructure projects that had long been delayed due to lack of funding were suddenly back on the table. New trade agreements were signed, bringing investment and technology transfers to sectors that had remained stagnant for decades. Yet, this new reality did not come without its challenges. Western powers responded with economic pressure, sanctions, and reduced aid. But even in the face of financial strain, Burkina Faso stood firm. President Traoré addressed his nation again, this time from the parliament, declaring, "It is better to stand in dignity than live in comfort under someone else's control. We will build our future with our own hands." This stance inspired a wave of policy changes across Africa. Nations began to review foreign contracts and push for more favorable terms. The African Union called for a summit to discuss greater economic cooperation and reduce dependency on external powers. The seeds of a new, confident, and self-reliant Africa had been planted. What had started as a simple flight had now become a movement. And while the skies had long cleared from that tense day, the message remained in the hearts of millions. The future of Africa belongs to Africans, and no foreign power can dictate their destiny. And so, the skies above the Atlantic that once echoed with tension now carry the legacy of a leader who refused to back down. This wasn't just a story about politics or power, it was about courage, about standing firm when the world expects you to fall. President Traoré's flight became more than a journey. It became a message to every small nation, to every silenced voice. You are stronger than you think, and freedom is always worth fighting for. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe that the era of small nations being controlled by larger powers is finally coming to an end? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and tell me which country you're watching from. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring content that reveals the hidden struggles and triumphs shaping our world, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and join our community of truth seekers. Your support helps keep these important stories alive and shared across the world. Thank you for watching, and remember, history isn't just written by the powerful, sometimes it's rewritten by the brave.